You ready?
I'm ready. Yep.
Wonderful.
So,
Well, the backstory is this. There was a time when Papua New Guinea was offended by the way the World Bank was treating it, and it just broke off communications. But then, after some dancing around, it agreed to come back. And I was on the mission that was the first new mission, it's the reconciliation mission to PNG, World Bank. I was one of a team of, I think, 6 people, and my job was the natural resources sector. And what I discovered very, very quickly was that the natural resources sector had no idea about how the bank might be able to help it or what it needed.
let me interrupt you.
Please, you were obviously there. Yeah.
So you were on a team with the bank,
Yeah.
right? And so when you say that you were on the natural resources sector, does that mean that you are working with the natural resources groups in the PNG?
It was for me to work with government,
Mm-hmm.
and if I put it in the World Bank's terms, to get the list of goodies that the World Bank was going to supply PNG.
So what would that be? Can you give me an example of that?
Oh, it might help it. Well, other people would. Well, roads might be vital in the natural resources section, or bridges, or water management of some sort, or support for its agricultural advisory service, or something of that sort.
Okay, so this was in the 1990s,
Yeah.
And it was PNG had independence from Great Britain in 1975, so it hadn't been an independent country for very long.
That's right.
And at that time, it's one of the most bioculturally diverse islands in the world.
Yeah.
And it has at least 852 known languages that are spoken on a very small amount of space. So when you landed there, where did you land?
Port Moresby.
And can you tell us something about that? Is it about like what was that like? What did you see when you were there? What kind of place was that?
It was a fairly restricted airfield, not terribly busy, quite a lot of small planes with people getting onto it with pigs and chickens. There were lots of people in tribal dress eating ice cream cones and one way or another misbehaving. It was clearly Papua New Guinea, if you know what I mean.
Can you just, like, what was the weather like? I mean, for those of us who've never been to Papua New Guinea, can you say a little bit?
Well, it has its range of weather, some of which actually affected me when I was in a plane that had trouble landing. But what was the weather like? It was like it is now in California. Hotter and more humid, but sunny most of the time, much of the time, punctuated by storms.
Okay.
Thunderstorms.
Yeah, so it's a hot, humid climate with a lot of storms and
yeah, tropical.
Very tropical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so what did the natural resource sections that you were working with, what would they?
That was for me to define it.
Ah.
Yeah, I was just given the brief to address the natural resource section.
So what happened when you got there? How did people receive you?
Well, I was really received by a committee that the government had set up, actually Ministry of Finance. It was under the Ministry of Finance, which was a management support committee. So the team would go into the provinces and talk with them, help with them in their day-to-day administration business, strengthening the administration. I worked with that team. That was important because I would normally, my first job would be to establish my contract with the client. I would have a client, and the client, my immediate client, was the head of that committee, the person responsible for that team. I would normally work with that person to create a team to work on process consultation. I didn't need to because the team actually existed, and that was the team I was given. It was a mixed team. It was all locals, with a couple of exceptions, one American and one British colonial. I can't remember where he came from, quite bright guy. That was my team. And my task was to coach this team to support the the administrative capacity of the well, put it this way, to build the capacity of the natural resources sector to plan for itself. Okay? And it would be the capacity that would know what help it wanted from abroad, especially from the World Bank. All right? I might say that when my report to the team that was, I've got ahead of myself. Go back to my being on the World Bank team. I reported back to the World Bank team the results of my visit and discovery that the country didn't have the capacity to tell the World Bank what it needed, and it acknowledged its greatest need was to develop that capacity. So I wrote my report, reporting on my interactions with the ministries and departments, and saying that there was strong support for World Bank assistance in building administrative capacity and planning capacity. My report was rejected by the World Bank, was not included to the report sent back to PNG, and the PNG rejected the World Bank's report, said it wanted my chapter. Okay?
So why did the World Bank not like that response?
Because it wanted my shopping list. And it didn't want a simple capacity building. And anyway, in the event, the report was changed to include my section. And then the PNG came back and said, yes, we would like these bridges and this and that, and we would like this support for capacity building, right? And they actually said they wanted me. So the bank gave in and sent me off to PNG. What'd you say?
Sounds like they were doing a very good job of negotiating with the bank early on.
Yeah, right. So yeah, so there I was with a team already created, but I had to coach them for their particular task here.
Mm.
Okay.
Hmm. So what did that entail? What did coaching for that task mean? What did that look like?
Well, one of the most important things in the first place is to build a team that is mutual supportive.
Mm.
And we did that with 6-packs on the beach every evening, and so on.
How long would you be there for? How long were you there for?
I had my original. I can't remember how long my original meeting was. I think it was a month or more. But my normal practice was a 3-week visit. It had 2 purposes: to check on progress and to plan the next phase. And I would sort of make maybe 4 or 5 visits in a year for 3 weeks. And they were responsible for doing the work. And I was not in an advisory capacity. It was quite clear. That was explicit. But the team needed skills. It needed facilitating skills. It needed clerking skills. That's important. I taught them clerking, Quaker clerking.
So for non-Quakers, can you explain what that is?
How did I explain what that is?
For non-Quakers, for people listening to this who are not.
Yeah, sure, of course. Well, you've probably seen my pamphlet that was called How Societal Changes or something. But at the back there is exactly all that. And you can go and look at it, but it gives the rules of behavior. Call upon by the clerk, no arguing, contribute your own idea. Don't need to repeat anything that's been adequately said before, but acknowledge that your approval. But those sorts of things, and I don't need to go through them right now, but you know them, and I have them very clearly listed, and they took to them. They were good, but I also taught them, as it were, recording skills. They weren't terribly good at keeping the record as the dialogues evolved. That was the first thing. But then when I took them out to show them how to do it, as it were, in the first province, what I also did was to initiate the whole process by working with senior administrators of the province. Actually, 30 turned up in the first province.
So you went to the province, and so did you have a workshop? Is that what you did, basically?
Essentially, it was a workshop, but it was an extended workshop over many days. 3 weeks essentially. 30 senior officers, and the first task was for each of them to say what was going on from the perspective of their department, ministry. And so lots of stories about what was happening in ECPIC province. Interesting, rich stuff. And what I did was to create a systems map of what was going on. And we went back, took the systems map to the group and said, is this right? can you improve on it? And so they talked about it. They added connections and boxes until they were in unity, right, with the conception of what was going on in the province. The next phase was, what are the most important things really to act on in what's going on? Can we identify 10 objectives, administration's objectives for this province? And they wrestled with that and they came up with 10. And what we did with that, and they came up again in unity, we practiced unity all the way, and we sent this out throughout the province through the various mechanisms that each department had, agricultural assistance, advisory assistance in the field, in the villages and the rest of it. But we also went to the university. We went to the Chamber of Commerce. We went to trade unions, most of which didn't have too great contact with the province specifically, but there were churches, obviously. And we got response from them. We had forms out, and what happened was that the proposal by the administration was very strongly supported. There were additions and qualifications, but we came back with the administration having public support for what they were proposing to do. And we developed that step by step. But in the course of that, we would sort of come back from that event and then have our coaching sessions. What did we need to learn from that? Who was particularly good at that? If we were going to work in pairs, which is what we did, who would make good pairs? Good clerks and good recorders, as it were. Well, that was the process. And it went right the way through until we had, well, the next stage actually was a very, very important one. If that's our objective, which of these departments needs to be involved here? It's not a single department concern. Can we make a team of various departments? And can we then get a budget for the work we have to do, which is not departmental, which is extra departmental, right? So the departments and ministries didn't actually lose any of their budget. These were extra budgetary programs being facilitated by the team, but by the particular cross-departmental teams that have been created. That's not possible. Oh, am I getting feedback? I'm getting feedback.
It's okay. It's not that bad.
Okay. Well, would you like to ask questions? I should just add for you that having done that and having got the teams going in pairs throughout the provinces, it was a cascading process. I was invited to assist with the national planning. And what I did was to get them to produce their national planning team. It wasn't very large, probably no more than 20. And we had them around the table, and I did the facilitating. and I had someone from the team recording. And we went essentially through the same process, reviewing what were the issues that were coming up in PNG, reviewing what were the critical things we needed to attend to. What we did was to have 1.5-hour sessions with an hour's break in between. And we did it in a big lecture hall in the university. PNG wasn't exempt from all the things that UK did when they gave up empire. That everywhere they built a university and tried to train a cadre of people to manage the country, as it were. So we occupied the big lecture theatre, which actually had, I think, I can't actually remember, but it was hundreds. It was like 300 seats in tiered with a platform at the bottom. And so we had the team on the platform, and we invited everyone, all the people that we've been connecting with, again, Chamber of Commerce, the churches, the university itself, I can't remember, but the public sector, and we had them break up into discussion groups to respond to what they had observed in the planning process. So we had public input. So we had 1.5 hours of planning, 1.5 hours break and feedback, and then response to the feedback. That was a day's effort. And each day we went like that. I don't think we went for 10 days. I can't remember. But anyway, that was our planning process. And that was fun. But it was, again, system self-reflection.
So when you were doing that, like, how much do you feel like you were gaining or learning from or trying to bring in indigenous ways of governing?
Not explicitly at all. But I think what you need to know is that where you had 100% participation that was indigenous, the chances are that they would do it their way.
What does that mean?
I mean, although all of the people involved, certainly in the administration, had university education and Europeanization, if I may put it that way. I think they knew how things were done locally, and insofar as they engaged locals, they would in fact do it in ways that the locals were familiar with.
Did you see any similarities between the processes that you were developing and local ways of governing?
I didn't know enough about local ways of governing. I did get quite closely involved in one program, which had in fact been inspired by a Brit who married a local woman and became quite prominent in their local community in East Sepik. He was entrepreneurial, but he was also communal. He wasn't a private enterprise guy. And they started all sorts of private enterprise, which included orchards of nuts with cattle underneath, and various other things, which were community enterprises. And they had community school and community play facilities and all that. They built community. Not that there wasn't community before, but it was what you might call a more modern community. But that was done, I think, absolutely using indigenous gathering decision-making processes. As far as I could tell, I didn't actually see it. With the Barnabans, it was very different. Definitely, I got involved in their traditional practice, and in many ways, you could see the replication of the sort of thing that it was sort of Quaker, sort of Quaker.
So let me pause there, and we can get into that story next time.
Yeah.
So was what you were doing in Papua New Guinea, was that different? Did that differ from what you saw happening in other areas of the UN or World Bank system at that time in terms of governing government processes?
Oh, no, nothing that I saw in the World Bank, certainly the World Bank, or the UNDP or FAO or UNICEF. Nothing was like that.
And what was different about what you were doing?
I think essentially, well, twofold. Not sitting on top of the system and saying what should be done, but engaging the system in its own reflection, and where appropriate, introducing Quaker decision-making processes. I think those are the two elements that were different. I must say that there were things I did which didn't do that, but really couldn't really call for it. I was given the assignment by the ACC, the Administrative Coordinating Committee of the UN system, the job of running a committee to report back on institutional arrangements in the UN system needed to oversee global malnutrition. And I just operated as a committee. I didn't go into the poor countries and get the malnourished involved in reviewing their system in any way. We just had committee meetings actually in Ford Foundation, because one of our members was Ford Foundation project officer. So, you know, we just done it as a committee. But there's a little sideline to that too. One of our recommendations was about reporting the state of global malnutrition, provision for that, and then the idea of having it reported as a regular bulletin, but associated with that, create the capacity to analyze the forces affecting the observed trends. The first part was accepted, and the second part was rejected by the World Bank. They didn't want anyone analyzing why malnutrition was going up or down.
Well, they probably knew what some of the answers would be.
Mm.
Well, thank you. That's a really good start. I think we can continue doing